Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Santa Barbara Public Library Parenting Webinar Series. My name is Rebecca Robertson. I'm an early literacy and outreach library technician with the Santa Barbara Public Library. And tonight we're kicking off our new series of parenting webinars in partnership with CADA, the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, as we talk about how the pandemic has impacted our children's social development and explore some strategies to strengthen their social skills. It's my pleasure to introduce you tonight to our presenters this evening. I've got Clinical Director Nancy Gottlieb and Multidimensional Family Therapy Clinical Supervisor Deise Capristo. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's strange to do a training where you can't see people. But I'm so glad you're here. And so we thought we would just talk about the social development of kids and how they've been affected. And I just want to acknowledge that we've all been through something, that these last 2.5 to 3 years has really been an event, and not to underestimate how we've all been affected. In fact, and I'm glad you're all here to talk about it. So Deise, if you want to progress through our slides.
It's not 1 second.
We're still kind of working out our technological stuff. There's 3 of us at 3 different locations. So social development, how kids are impacted, and we'll sort of go through the different age groups and stuff, but they're thinking that the pandemic could have some long-lasting impacts on children and youth, and perhaps more so for some of the older children. And this is because during that time, childcare programs were closed, kids were isolated, there was social distancing, kids missed opportunities for development through social interactions. Like if you just think about how your kids are on the playground or interacting with kids in social settings that didn't exist. They missed celebrations, there weren't birthday parties. My grandson and granddaughter missed their bar mitzvah and their bat mitzvah. Even funerals, people if you've lost someone, you couldn't even go and share your grief with other people. It was a hard for all of us. For older youth, social isolation contributes to anxiety and depression, and I'll talk some more about that. It's sort of like when you're up against your own thinking. And then we'll explore, just the scope of how kids have been affected, and also talk about things, the resiliency and things that help to compensate for that, to help kids overcome that. Next slide. So the challenges for children and youth during that time, and I'm sure you know this from your own children or from your own lived experience, is just not having, you want to go back one, not having your regular routines, and then the virtual learning, especially for older kids, was really tough. All of a sudden, teachers, some teachers were just MIA, like they would spend an hour online with their kids and that was it, where normally the kids are with them all day long. And so then the parents were left with trying to help the kids do well and be successful. But the truth is, a lot of us aren't educated as educators, or I don't know if I could do 6th grade math, honestly. Maybe if someone gave me a little brief, an update on that, but I'm just saying, I think it was really stressful for everybody. Then the other thing is that kids and adults, we weren't getting our regular health care. So there wasn't well care visits, there weren't, normal vaccinations. And so that eliminated the opportunity to identify problems if they did exist. And this was true even for, kids who had grief or mental health problems. There's really nobody to spot it and make the referrals. And usually that's done at school to eyeball that there was a problem. And then there's also housing and food insecurity. People lost their jobs because businesses were shut down. And that all contributes to anxiety, depression, and a sense of, insecurity, not feeling safe. So we're going to outline, you can go to the next slide. We're going to outline the developmental stages, and Daisy's going to talk about that. But I really wanted to point out that the Center for Disease Control has actually developed a milestone tracker so that you can actually download this app, and we have a handout for you to tell you how to get it. Put it on your phone, and then you can actually monitor when your kids accomplish certain milestones in their personal development. And there's a window for that. It's not like everybody does it at 2.5 months. It's like between 2 months and 6 months. But when you have this app, it can help you track those with your kids. And then I'm going to give it over to Daisy to talk about developmental milestones.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Deise Capristo, and I'll be talking to you guys about the child developmental stones within children. So I'm going to start with birth to 5 years old. In the first 5 years are the most crucial years of a child. These are the times where they are exploring, getting to know their world. And for example, children take their first steps usually by 15 months. They play with other children by the time they're 3. And some of them can even write some letters by the time they're 5. But all this begins very early on. And with the pandemic, as Nancy was sharing, people and families were isolated, and some of these children were, at home, not seeing the world out there. I still remember my daughter, who was 6 months old when the pandemic first hit. And the first time she went to a Costco after we were able to do more things together and be out as a family, like, her face just lit up, and she was just amazed by seeing everyone at Costco and all the things that were around her. That was the first time where I really realized personally, like, it really impacted her, the fact that I couldn't even take her to the grocery store, something so natural. And so monitoring where your children is meeting their milestones for their age is an important step. And, we can take to promote healthy childhood development. And as you all know, the Santa Barbara Public Library has tons of programming that helps with that piece for young children. And every child develops at their own pace. And, we as parents know our child best. But if you have concerns, always talk to your doctor's pediatrician. And then, the first 5 years is where they develop their ability to speak, their social motor skills, and also their ability to start interacting. But by the age they're 6 to 11, this is the time where they're growing independently. That's when they start forming friendships. And this is, where peer pressure can have a negative impact on their well-being. And during the pandemic, if they were at home, maybe that was a good thing. Maybe there wasn't that much peer pressure from school, but there was other pressures maybe within the home, being with older siblings. Children who develop confidence in themselves and their abilities are better equipped to resist peer pressure. So the more a child is confident within themselves, the more they will be able to resist peer pressure and actually say no, because they'll have that ability to stand up for themselves. They'll have that ability to speak and feel like they have a voice. And then children approaching puberty and developing a greater awareness of their body and the potential of body image concerns. I would say that usually happens between 11 and 12, although we're seeing that in younger kids as well. And it's very important as parents or caregivers or the trusted adult in a child's life that we're involved in their school, meeting with their friends, and communicating openly during this essential time. It's important that we help them make smart choices, communicate to set clear rules, and use proper discipline instead of punishment. And what we mean by proper discipline is there's various discipline types, right? There's types where it's very loose and they're free for all. Well, there's a discipline type where it's very harsh. The goal is to have, and maybe there's a lot of punishment and a lot of shame when there's something that was done that was not supposed to be done, or a rule is broken. But what we mean is hopefully families are able to have a balance, where the balance is knowing how to set a rule and a guideline based on their age. If a 3-year-old is running maybe and not in a safe space, instead of punishing him for that, it's more of talking to them and explaining to them at that age, we walk at this space for your safety. We want to keep you safe. Mommy wants you to be safe. The family wants you to be safe. If a car comes, you could get hurt. Being able to use your words in a soft tone so that children are able to respond and start developing even that friendship. But of course, as they get to 6 to 11 years old, they have more awareness. So an 11-year-old will understand, if I should be able to understand, if I cross the street, I can get hurt if I don't watch both ways. And again, the point is as parents is to have that balance of knowing how to speak to each child based on their age. And I can know that could be difficult depending on the age and if there's different ages in a household. But the key is, and I know being a parent can be difficult, the key is, how can I just set these clear rules, use discipline that doesn't provide shame, and it's not coercive to children. And all of this will help better in their development, and it helps them grow in healthy ways. And with the pandemic, a lot of the things that we saw within that time frame too, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit more, is given that families were in the home all together and stressors were high, some of those discipline styles became more harsh or became more free for all, just given the stress level that a lot of families were facing. We're going to go a little bit more into teenage years. Teens experience a wave of physical and emotional and social changes, and those are huge. I mean, if we all remember when we were teenagers, we could probably pinpoint the difficulties we might have faced during that time, because physically our body is changing, and sometimes our chronological age and our body physically, the way it's changing, maybe not necessarily match our mentality or capacity at that point. Emotionally, we're getting to know ourselves. We're getting to identify who we are. What do we mean to the world? How do we fit into the world? And there's a lot of social changes. My best friend from middle school might not be my best friend in high school anymore because we have different interests, or, our likes have changed. And what can you do? As a parents, we could be aware of any changes in behavior or as kids are transitioning from latency age to teenage years. So between the age of 11 to 13 or 11 to 15 is where we start noticing some of these changes. And what can we do is we have to be aware of any changes in someone's behavior, discuss what to do in an uncomfortable situation. I think specifically for teenagers in that stage where they're trying the pre-pubescent stages, where they might start feeling attractions to other people and they don't even know how to respond to an uncomfortable situation. So being able to openly talk about that is very important. Encouraging sleep, exercise, and good nutrition. I cannot emphasize sleep. How many teens I encounter that I hear, oh, I go to sleep at 2 a.m, but I wake up by 7. I'm like, how do you function at school? So very, very much encouraging sleep, exercise, and good nutrition. Being able to respect their opinions and feelings, and also their privacy. And I know that could vary from home to home depending on each home's, cultural values, but it is very important to have conversations with our teenagers about, what do you think about this? Because that's how you get to know them. When parents shows curiosity in their opinion, a child feels seen. And if they feel seen, they feel understood. And even if parents and children may have difference of opinion, they feel seen, or like a parent understands them, even if they don't agree on the same topic. And this is, respecting their feelings. Again, this is where you promote open conversations, and teens feel like, oh, I could go to my parent if I'm having, symptoms of sadness. And who do I go to? I can go to my parent because, you know what, last time we spoke about this other topic, And even though we didn't agree, I felt supported and respected. And privacy, having rules and guidelines about what is accepted and not accepted in your home in terms of privacy. And because teenagers are developing their own autonomy, being able to provide that space for them to have their privacy. And that's very important, because then they're able to see that they're also an individual. And most important, spending a lot of time together. I know it's very common that teenagers don't want anything to do with their parents anymore. Nope, I don't want to go to that anymore with you. Nope, I don't want to go to the store with you. But finding different moments where you do spend time together. Maybe it's at dinner time. No matter what, we're always going to spend time together at dinner time. I have seen, or my personal experiences, Sundays, no matter what, we spend time together with the family. Monday through Saturday, friends, school, other social gatherings, but Sunday was family time. So really finding the time where you can increase that spending time together, especially in the teenage years when they're wanting not to do anything to do with their parents sometimes. Being able to support their involvement in school and extracurricular activities. And this could go for any age, not just teenage years. If there's kids who are into sports or they're into dance, swimming, and I know in middle school and high schools when they have those as a course in school, so there's more of that than in the younger age. But being able to be their cheerleaders is very, very important. The importance of a child seeing their parent out there rooting for them is very extremely important, because they feel supported by the caregiver or the parents. And I know during the pandemic, a lot of this stuff went away. A lot of the sports and the extracurricular activities went away, and a lot of teenagers really went into this depression because they felt this sense of missing out. They felt like, I don't have that anymore. They couldn't go hang out with their friends anymore at the sporting event, or they couldn't have that connection that they have during practice. So definitely teenagers and children who were very involved with extracurricular activities were impacted by that. Being able to talk to our teens openly about the challenges that they're facing. A lot of our teens face different challenges within school. And it's important that as we respect their opinions, that we're able to openly have this conversation so they could feel supported. So the impacts of COVID on child development, Nancy, I believe you were going to take on.
Yeah. So I also want to say, and just talking to your kids, regardless of their age, I think it's really important just to acknowledge that we've all been through something, and so like you could say to your kids, like, I'm really proud how we got through this, or I know it's been a really tough time and it's going to take a lot to catch up at school. Nationwide, all the kids have fallen behind just from the lack of education. So, I think just to acknowledge that, and that's kind of the norm, and I think it just really helps. So now I'm going to actually talk about some of the impacts. So social isolation and stress really have negatively impacted some children, and there have been delays, developmental delays, where kids are speaking later or not meeting their milestones on time. We'll talk about the resiliency later. I mean, the good news is it looks like they recoup, but that's an actual reality, that they have been affected. And you can go to the next slide. The social isolation has really affected mental health impacts. Not having those daily interactions, you don't have that sense of confidence or even skills at learning how to, walk up and say hi. Used to be kids would just run up and say hi. That happens less. Where kids stay back a little bit, or they feel a little cautious. And then they also said that they did a tracking of 900 kids between March of 2020 and June of 21 when they were born during that time, and they actually did see that there was a decrease in their language and motor skills. and during that time. Subsequently, it looks like that there's a resilience to that, but you can't underestimate the importance of what we do socially as human beings. The other thing is that for children's mental health, you know, the Board of Pediatrics now are requiring anxiety screening on any children over 8, and that's the nationwide. The pediatric board is recommending that. That's how prevalent they're noticing how kids have been affected. And, you know, they're saying 20% of all parents notice that their kids between 5 and 12 had experienced some worsening of their emotional or mental health. And those of you who are parents, you certainly know your own experience. And, you know, maybe when we get to questions, we can talk about some of that if you want to. There was also an increase in mental health emergency department visits. It went up 24% for children 5 to 11 and 31% for adolescents. And my son-in-law is an emergency room doctor for pediatrics, and he was saying that, you know, the other thing that he was seeing for kids that were coming into the ER is that, you know, one of the things that schools do is they identify if there's abuse or neglect, and if they're not in school, they're not getting identified. And so by the time they show up in an emergency room, they really have, you know, gone down the road a fair piece, and you know, and so that contributes to that number 2. Do you want to go to the next slide? For teenagers, 37%, so that's more than 1 in 3 students, said that they experienced some sort of poor mental health during the COVID pandemic. 44%, that's like almost half, said that they felt sad or hopeless over the past year. And less than half felt like they felt close to people at school. They just didn't feel connected to their friends or teachers, even if they were connecting through telehealth. So, I mean, even just being able to say to your child or to family members, like, we've all been through something, we really have. So, you know, they did, this is a nationwide study. I just pulled the data out for California, but it has it for all states. And this is for adults between April and June. So those 2 years, 2020 to 22, adults reported 30%, that's again 1 in 3, of having depression. 24%, that's 1 in 4, having anxiety, and 34% having both depression and anxiety. So these are our adults. These are our parents. This is you trying to take care of your kids. When you're depressed and anxious and overwhelmed, and maybe you have financial stress and you can't go to work, and, you know, this is all impacting all of us. And that's really not an unusual phenomenon. So of those people who identified that they had symptoms or were being affected, 20% said they knew they needed help, and there was no way they could get it. It just was, they couldn't get connected. And that's that feeling of isolation. So parents feel isolated. I mean, that's what's so nice about this library program, is because you have a chance to meet other parents and talk, have your kids socialize. I just think it's so important. I was a teenage mom, and they put me into this teenage peer program, and you know, it was other teen mothers, and I think it was really helpful just having that support with each other. We could share our problems and our challenges, and I think that's I would encourage you to do that, but that's not having that has had its impact. Then impacts of teens at home. So this was, you know, sort of talking about, you know, you have parents who are having trouble, and then they're having trouble in their own relationships. So more than half of teens, 55%, reported they experienced emotional abuse by a parent or another adult in the home, including swearing, insulting, punching, impatience. 11% said they had physical abuse by a parent, including hitting, beating, kicking, physically hurting the student, and 29% reported that it's like 1 in 3 had a parent who had lost their job. So all that pressure adds up, and you're stuck in a space together, and so it has an impact. So those impacts are part of what's on the list of things we call adverse childhood events. So I kind of really wanted to talk to you about, we call them ACEs. You may have heard about them. I don't know if you've done any kind of exposure to this. It's we first started talking about ACEs, like 20 years ago. Now they've actually are starting to work with it. So being safe in the pandemic is really important, and not feeling safe or having these adverse, watching domestic violence, having physical violence, neglect, those are things that are on the list of things that are adverse childhood experience, and they can negatively impact your social development, your emotional development, learning, and health for your whole life if there is in a child, if there isn't an intervention. So you can go to the next slide. So this, so I'll just tell you the background about ACEs. So Kaiser Permanente and the Mental Health Department of the United States, CMS, they got together and they did this study. So the thing about Kaiser Health is that they have people who sign up for their health insurance, and they tend to be on their plans for years. So they had patients that had been in their system for like 25 years, and so they sent questionnaires out, over 17,000 questionnaires to their patients, and they asked them about what kind of childhood events that had happened to them. And I think the next slide has the chart, maybe. Let me see if it's on. Yeah. So these are the questions they asked. There's 10 questions. So in your life, did any of these things happen to you? And it didn't matter how often it happened, but you got 1 point for each event. So these related to emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect. So that's like not getting enough food, not having a proper housing, not having clothes to protect you in the cold, that kind of stuff. And then household dysfunction, which is, being treated violently by your mother, household substance abuse. So during the pandemic, we know substance abuse went up for everybody. So if you have a substance abusing person in the household, that was an event. Having someone in the household who has a mental health problem, that's an event. Parents separating or being divorced, or having an incarcerated parent. So you can see on those household events, pretty much an awful lot of folks during the pandemic had like at least 3 of those, maybe more, but just having the substance abuse, mental health, and perhaps some sort of violence. So anyway, if any of those events happened to you as a kid, you got 1 point. And then during the study, they got all those questionnaires back, and then they compared those scores to their health records to see if there was any correlation between the number of traumatic events or adverse events that happened in childhood and how it affected them in their health as adults. So they found that it caused, there was a correlation between severe and persistent emotional problems, health risk behaviors, social problems, physical disease and disability, like higher frequency of heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity, and that life expectancy was on average 10 years less if you had 4 or more. So I have some little charts. So these are the charts. So this chart just tells you the frequency. So the thing about ACEs, when they did this, everybody had something, like there's nobody who's escaped childhood without adverse events. I'm just telling you, everybody had something. So it's just how many. So on average, at least a third had at least 3. So these are sort of the numbers, women and men, and how many had each occurrence. So like household substance abuse, almost 30% of all women and almost 24% of all men had that in their household growing up. So that's like 1 in 4. Mental illness, same thing, like 1 in 4. So I just want to sort of say that if you find yourself having a lot of these numbers, don't feel like, oh gee, I have something totally deformed. It's really called normal events that happen in childhood that we are now trying to get conscious about and change the way we parent and change the way we could do interventions with kids to mediate the effects these might have. So then this is the scores and how it contributed to just like alcohol. So if you had more than 3 of such events in your life, and we've already looked at the little chart and figured out that almost everyone had 3 during the pandemic, your chances of alcoholism goes up 10%. Your chances of substance abuse goes up 24%, almost 25%. So, and smoking, goes up 11% if you had like 3 or more adverse events during childhood, and there's nothing to mediate those. So you could see, like, when people get into addiction or smoking, or that it's not altogether their fault. It's really just the accumulation of adverse events. And but now that we're getting more conscious and doing interventions, hopefully that's all going to change. So I have for mental health, this is and these are the things that they were reporting among kids and adults during the pandemic. And that's, panic, 16% had panic. If you had 3 or more, I'm just using that number, but you can see all the numbers. If you had 4 or more, 20% chance of having panic. If you had 4 or more, you have a 50% chance of being depressed. So that's exactly what we saw in the research, that especially among adolescents and adults, that their depression went up significantly. Okay, next slide. So this is just examples. Women are in the red, men are in the yellow. So you could just see it a different way. If you had 1, you had 0, you still got a little, everybody has a little depression, there's a certain amount just in the population. But if you had, 4 or more, it goes way up. And so it's just another way of sort of looking at it. So, what they're saying is that approximately half of all the children in the US will have had some sort of a traumatic event. And the trick is, how to figure out how to heal it. Sometimes there are these chronic traumas with no healing in between. So, and I think that was part of the problem during the pandemic, because it was just constantly in the news and people were dying and you couldn't go anywhere. And then you have your parents fighting, or you have financial stress, or there's not enough food in the fridge. And all of those are like little micro traumas that just go on every day that contribute to just not feeling safe. And then you just anxiety, and so that's why the Board of Pediatrics said now we have to screen all kids for anxiety. It's another kind of pandemic that we have to now address and are. And Daisy's going to talk some more about that as we get down. So the stress response, I'll just say how that contributes real quick. And you've probably all heard about fight, flight. And so when you have all those little traumas, I'll just say, we as humans are here because we had several hundreds of generations before us who were really good at surviving. Like, I had a relative 2,000 years ago who knew how to outrun dinosaurs. I'm just saying, I wouldn't be here otherwise. So we all have this great history of ancestors who knew how to survive. And part of this fight flight response, the survival response, is just that. It's our brain knowing that when we perceive danger, and that perception comes without thought. That's like an autopilot. It's just like when you're driving, you see someone on the road, you hit the brake. You hit the brake. You don't think about it. It just happens. And and so that's what the fight flight response is that you instantly respond to survive. The trouble is that we have these really great, advanced, developed survival systems, but now they're being activated by things like our parents fighting in the living room. And so you have all these hormones and things that affect your body that normally would cause you to want to fight or run, and now it just affects your body. And so so that's, I think maybe you're on next.
Yeah. Yes, I am. So, and along the lines that Nancy was saying, when the young brains are in the state of prolonged stress, it could definitely impact, the social and developmental growth, because there's the stress hormone cortisol is being released throughout the body and throughout the brain. So that is what trunks the development of any child or person. So these stress hormones compromise our normal brain development. and the immature immune and nervous systems. So here we have our central nervous system and our brain now being activated and operating from a stress and high levels of cortisol, which, like Nancy was saying, then that is correlated to later in life to can be related to health impact, heart disease, diabetes, heart attacks, cancer. And there's other great studies that show that huge correlation. And there's other studies happening now, even in our community, that are studying that correlation. And sustained stress in childhood results in overproduction of this cortisol with profound lifelong impacts on the brain and the body. And the nervous system can develop a chronic stress response. If you ever been around someone who's been maybe in a severe car accident and they hear big bang, they might startle all of a sudden. That's someone whose central nervous system is responding, and it hasn't developed the ability to distinguish, oh, I'm not in that car anymore. I'm now in the safe space. But the good thing is that even though a body can have, cortisol released throughout their body, there's the piece of resiliency that we also want to talk about, because there is that piece that helps us overcome those things. But again, back to the physiological arousal, the more threatened, the more primitive or regressed the style of thinking and behavior can become in a child. When a traumatized child is in a state of alarm, they'll be less capable of concentrating. The child can be more anxious and will pay more attention to nonverbal cues, such as a tone of voice or the body posture or facial expression of a person around them. If you've ever seen children who are just very attuned and very, they're just really watching out for their behavior. And I think kids naturally have that in general, like that's just their nature. But imagine a child who unfortunately has, experienced some of the traumas that Nancy had mentioned, that state of alarm is even higher. Children exposed to significant threat will also reset their baseline state of arousal, such that even when no external threats or demands are present, there will be a physiological state of persistent alarm. Kind of like what I was saying with the bang, kid can be sitting in the classroom and hear something externally and can react without even knowing what it really is or where it came from. Even a relatively small stressor can instigate a state of fear or terror for someone. The cognition and behavior of a child will reflect his or her state of arousal, because of that alarm system. And the key is learning how to retrain the brain so that alarm system knows how to manage it. And that's where I'm going to go back I'm going to talk about resiliency next, because a lot of the children and youth and families, including parents, we're in the state of alarm. As Nancy was mentioning, just by seeing the news, just by hearing the numbers, just by knowing, how high the infections of COVID were going on in their community, or within their family system, or if knowing the amount of people who maybe passed away because of COVID. Many of us were in that state of alarm all the time. I mean, I wouldn't take my daughter to the grocery store for a long time. It took me a while to feel comfortable and be able to take her. So we were definitely all in that state of alarm. And now I think that things have quieted down somewhat, although we are seeing families and people and children and youth who still have the sequence of the pandemic, because there's still people with high anxiety. There's still a lot of people with depression. The good thing is we can build healthy coping skills. And some of those coping skills is to help retrain our brain, retrain our central nervous system. And more than anything, it's like we're calming down our central nervous system. We're retraining our brain to notice that bang, oh, wait a minute. If we're in the present moment, we'll be able to see and be aware that bang is not a threat to me right now. That's just a loud noise. So this is where building healthy coping skills comes in hands, because we need to build emotional self-awareness, and really be aware of our body and our responses and what feeling we're getting. when a big bang happens around us, and where's that coming from, and how did that make me feel, and how did that feel in my body. And other coping skills is grounding techniques, self-soothing techniques, making safer choices. If I'm stressed and anxious, am I gonna go and lay down and take a rest and a nap, or am I gonna go and buy a bottle of wine? And choosing, just making better choices. Not that drinking a glass of wine is bad, but making choices that are healthy for oneself, that will help us really care for our body and our brain and our central nervous system. And just getting information, being here today, finding out how else to engage in healthy coping skills and building those. So what helps, research shows that surrounding a youth or a child with the proper support, we were talking about having those open discussions, building that trust, can reverse these trends and help our youth now and in the future. Even if a child has had a traumatic experience, or if a child or youth came out of the pandemic with depression and anxiety, that's not the end of it. There's help. There's way for us to heal from it. It's all about that connection, and helping that youth, feel supported, making sure they're connected to school, having the sense that they belong and that they're cared for and that they're supported. And it could be that they belong with the group at school, whether it be a sport, whether it be a group of kids, whether it be at home, whether it be at their church. Feeling that connection is really, really important. And youth who felt more connected to adults and peers at school were significantly less likely to report a persistent feeling of sadness or hopelessness. So people who, even during isolation, who felt connected to others, or who created like those pods that were created in the community, those are the children that, didn't report that persistent feeling of sadness or hopelessness, because they still had that connection to other relationships. And researchers propose that many of the children falling behind in developmentally will catch up, without lasting effects. Even if we see that some people did fall behind in their reading, or did fall behind in their social developmental skills for not being in school or not interacting with other children, there's hope that they can recuperate from that. So we said there's help. Schools are crucial partners in supporting the health and well-being of students. They provide opportunities for academic, social, and mental health and physical health services, because schools officials are the first eyes, because that's where all these children are at. So they're the ones who are able to tease out like what's happening, or they're the ones who see the behavior, and they're the first ones to call a parent or a caregiver and say, hey, we noticed this and we want to refer you, provide you this service or this support. And they help protect against all these negative outcomes that we were speaking about. And here in Santa Barbara, there's lots of new funding to support services in schools and the community at large. And I just mentioned a couple of agencies here in town, that I know are there to help with these. If any of your children or your youth, or you feel are suffering from any depression, anxiety, and or have fallen behind in their social, emotional, developmental skills, these are some agencies here in town that can assist with those difficulties. CADA, where Nancy and I work, Be Well, Behavioral Wellness, it's the county. CALM is a local nonprofit here. Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinics, they have, they're a federal health qualified center clinics, and they're all over town, and they have pediatric doctors there who are also screening for ACEs, as well as the adult population. So they're there to help and support and provide resources. Mariposa's project, which is huge on the social and emotional development for young children. I know they provide speech therapy and social and motor skills therapy, as well as physical therapy if any children is falling behind. Tri-County Regional Center definitely provides assistance in assessing and ensuring children are meeting those milestones. Santa Barbara Public Health Family Service Agency also has an array of services that can assist with any of those things we mentioned that might be present in young children or youth and even adults. A lot of these agencies also help adults. So strategies for dealing with distress. Reading, hobbies that promote healthy distractions, listening to music, journaling, exercising. Music really helps express our feelings sometimes, and we can't pinpoint what we're actually feeling. Maybe a song can. I love that with teenagers, especially teenagers that won't really express what they're thinking or feeling, but you ask them, hey, tell me about your favorite song, or show me your favorite song. And then you get you get to know them just by the song that they're listening. Exercising, doing yoga, appropriate use of respectful humor. Humor can help and make wonders. Relaxation techniques, mindfulness, self-hypnosis and guided imagery, cognitive behavioral therapy. And as we mentioned, contacting your pediatric healthcare provider to reach out for more resources, the school, and overall for us to be patient with our children, other adults, and ourselves. I love seeing those memes or those posters that say kindness is free. And, and just being patient and kind to everyone. Because as Nancy said, we all been through a lot. And we all have overcome the other side of it. Some in different ways, others are still grieving if they did lose someone to COVID. And so it's important just for us to be kind and patient with ourselves. I think if we're kind with ourselves, then we'll be able to be kind and patient also with our children and those around us. And I want to do a quick, I think we have a few more, we do have time to do a quick guided imagery. So it's called taking water breath.
So this would be an example of self-coping.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd give you a hands-on example.
Yes. So you can stare at the image or close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you. And we're going to take some water breaths. So just get comfortable, taking a deep breath, inhaling slowly through your nose, and then exhaling slowly through your mouth. And on the next breath, breathe in and just let the air flow like a river through your body. So just imagine that each breath you take is a river running through your body. So we're going to breathe in, let the air flow like a river through your body. So we're going to take one last deep breath. Breathe in, letting the air flow in our body like a river. And that was a small guided deep breathing exercise that you guys can use on a regular basis and even with your children. When sometimes children are in this panic mode or they're upset, sitting with them and just, hey, let's breathe in together. Oh, I have this cool game. We breathe in and it feels like we have water in our body, and kids are great with their imagination. So I highly recommend using this for yourself as a parent or as an adult or caregiver, and also with your children and youth. And studies have actually shown that people who engage in meditation or guided imagery exercises on a daily basis, that reduces their stress significantly.
It actually changes the brain,
Mm-hmm.
as does yoga. It actually sort of resets that neurological regulation and compensates for that fight flight. It actually changes your response system. Mm-hmm. And I would just ask that you noticed for yourself the difference you felt after just doing that for a few moments, if you notice the difference in your body.
Mhm. And what to do? Remember to take care of yourself. Celebrate positive contributions you have made. Set reasonable expectations for oneself and our children. Teaching children how to cope with the simple act of imagining that water is running through their body through a simple deep breathing exercise will help them help you, and then helping them learn life skills that will make them even more resilient. And the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is that at least one stable and committed relationship with an adult. As long as a child has one committed, stable relationship with an adult, that makes a world of a difference. A child needs to feel that at least one person, or a youth needs to feel that at least one person in the world is madly in love with them, whether it be a grandma, a grandpa, a mom, a dad, an older sibling. And that makes a huge difference. And this can be a teacher, a coach, family member, friends, a spiritual leader, or our librarians. And you can see a lot of children and, interact with a lot of families. It could be anyone too in our community that's a positive person for this child or this youth. Nurturing and positive relationships with an adult who sees their strengths. And that's what I mean by someone who's madly in love with them, because that is what helps a child feel seen, loved, and cared for. In school, relationships are brief, and they're for one school year, and that can make a dramatic, lasting impact. So helping children navigate that, because a lot of children did lose some friends throughout the pandemic and not being with them, but still having that supportive, trusting adult will continue to help them develop that resiliency within them. And like we're saying, resilience takes relationship. It's the science term that we use to describe how an object can return to its original form after being bent, compressed, or stretched, in this case, the brain. But the resiliency part of it is that our brain has a elasticity. And as Nancy was mentioning, with having adaptive coping skills, we can rebuild that elasticity for it to continue to grow in a positive way. And the human body. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, I was just going to say about relationship, the importance of relationships. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, it really has to do with the brain. If you just think about when you hold a baby, how you feel and how the baby feels, that's a calming thing. And that the brain's actually programmed like mirroring. When you laugh at a baby and they laugh back at you, that we actually have, they're called mirroring cells in our brain that so I see you, and then that it reflects into me, and that relationship literally is healing on a cellular level, on a neurological level. So you could see how isolation could be so damaging or harmful when resiliency and healing takes relationships.
Absolutely. So we're ready for questions if anyone has questions.
I just, we'll do questions, but I also wanted to make a little space for Lisa to share her observations too about resilience.
Well, we were talking about this before the panel, and I'm sure a few of you out there know me because I run the early childhood stay and play program. And I know that all of the things that we've been watching our kids go through sounds really scary. It feels like everything bad is happening. But in the last year that I've had the privilege of hanging out with your children, I'm seeing resiliency in action. I'm seeing children that they were 6 months old and coming to the stay and play program, and they were avoidant. They wouldn't talk to other people. They wouldn't necessarily make eye contact. We're a year out and they're running up and giving me a hug when they arrive. They're greeting their friends. It's a very big deal. The amount of change that they can go through is really important social development. It's possible. I see it every single day. So I just want to kind of reassure parents that, it's not all bad things. They can bounce back, but we do have to nurture those relationships. I think that that's really important.
And if you have a child that you feel is having some trouble and doesn't seem to be meeting their markers, and you can look at the handouts or look at the app, and then you should talk to your pediatrician and ask, have someone do an assessment. There's plenty of assessment folks around. And the questions, I'm happy to answer anything anyone.
Yeah, if anyone has a question that you want to pop in the chat, please do. So I work with the little ones, but I have a teenager and I actually have a conversation or a question about teenagers, just because I was at home with my teenager who was trying to do high school on Zoom. His first year of high school was on Zoom. So any other parents in that boat, I get it. It's challenging. What I was thinking about when you were talking about how we need to get our kids to talk to us, how we need to connect them, and when they're teens, it's difficult. One thing that really came to my mind is also the isolation and the depression and the frustration and the anxiety as adults we go through. And I was wondering if you had suggestions on how to bring what we're going through to our kids to help meet them in the middle.
Well, that's kind of a loaded question, because in a certain sense, you don't want to increase their anxiety by them worrying about you.
No, I mean to acknowledge that like they're not alone, that like
Yeah,
we're communally going through this moment.
Yeah, I think really just sharing about that. You could even share about this training, but I think the key word that Deise used earlier in working with our kids is curiosity. So like you could just ask, I'm just curious, like, what do you think about all this stuff, and what have you noticed, and what have you noticed on your friends, and are your friends' parents going crazy just like me, or just be, just be curious, ask them about what their experience is and what they notice, and then first of all you get to kind of hear but that opens the door. Curiosity is and you do it out of real curiosity, not interrogation. Kids do not want to be interrogated. Like, well, what do you mean by this? And what, like really, like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that. What made you get that way? And this is the way I think about it. It's just so you, like you would with someone who wasn't your child. So I think curiosity is really a powerful, powerful thing.
I did see a question pop up about that app, and I think you answered it. They were wondering where they could download it. So this is perfect.
Yeah, it's at the App Store or Google Play.
Okay.
And I don't know if it has the name there. Does it actually have the name?
Yeah, it's called Milestone Tracker.
Okay, cool.
And it's through the CDC website.
Well, they also have it at the App Store and at the Google Play.
Yeah.
I didn't actually look to see, but I bet it's there.
Yeah.
What's nice is you can register your kid in there too. So
yeah. And I was just going to add to, in being curious with your child, I think if you're at any moment a parent is feeling their own stress or their own anxiety or their own sadness, being able to name it for themselves. And if a child happens to be present, just saying, mommy is feeling a little bit sad right now. Mommy's going to take a 5-minute break. Mommy will be right back. Of course, you leave, if it's a younger children, you leave them with another trusted adult. And, if they're able to see that you take your own space to take care of yourself, then children will model that behavior. Or children will, my daughter's 3 and I've seen her sometimes, she said, mommy, I need my space. Okay, you need your space. And even just in sitting next to each other, not necessarily because she's having a meltdown or feelings, but just a simple act. And I'm like, she learned that because when I've needed space, I've said, oh, mommy needs her space. Mommy needs to sit here, but mommy needs her, or mommy's going to sit here. Mommy needs her space. And I've even seen her that with brother. When brother's all over her, she's like, she tells him, Marcos, I need my space, please. And it's just modeling. Kids are sponges, and they will, and teenagers too. Even though when we think they're not listening or not watching, oh, they are. They are.
I always tell people, we don't come into this world with owner manuals,
Mm-mm.
So, it's just trying to figure it out. So I just went, I have an Android, and I went to the Play Store and I put in exactly that tracker, and it's right there. It's free.
Perfect. I am putting up in the chat for anyone who is interested in keeping up with us with this ongoing series. There's a link to do a little survey for our family literacy project, and we'll let you know before everyone else when we have more of these meetings. Our next one's coming up November 9th. We're going to be talking about grieving while parenting, which is a big one. So if you have questions about raising your kids while you're grieving or you're going through loss, it's a great time to bring those questions. And I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. Thank you so much for your expertise. Thank you for being here for us. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for your invitation.
Yes, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody.